Hawkeye FPV has released another compact size HD camera. This is the Thumb 2. The V2 of the Thumb gives you an internal battery and a companion app to manage the settings via your smartphone over Wi Fi and preview your video. The Thumb is also magnetic and includes wearable accessories like this chest mount here, so it makes it usable beyond FPV aircraft. Over the past few months, through various firmware updates from Hawkeye to improve this camera, I've tried it in various modes and I've observed how the video is stabilized in GyroFlow. Most of the footage you're going to see throughout this video was recorded in 1080p at 50 frames per second. Full disclosure, this camera was provided by a vendor for me for the purpose of review. However, they did not have any input into the contents of the review. And I think this is a good time to segue into why most of this footage is shot in 1080 at 50 instead of shooting it in 4K, because it is the Hawkeye Thumb 2 4K, right? So why wouldn't you shoot in 4K? I was questioning whether or not the Hawkeye Thumb 2 really made a difference in 4K versus 1080 or not, so I took it to the test. This gazebo was a perfect subject to film a little 4K and a little 1080, and then blow the images up and put them side by side. I think the tiles on the roof here are really telling. There is no major discernible difference between the 1080 and the 4K. The stairs also tell the same story. I mean, I can't see that much of a difference here. Maybe you do, and I'm wrong. Let me know down in the comments below. Tell me if I'm crazy, because just do not see the benefit of 4K on this camera. And it's not just the 4K. Here are some comparison shots of 1080 versus 2.5 versus 4K. Different area, different subject. 1080 versus 2.5K. I'm not seeing any more detail. And again, here we go. 1080 versus 4K. Not seeing the detail. For reference, here's this object along with the foliage up close. Besides the lack of substantial extra detail by switching to 4K and the increased file sizes as a result for no reason, you're also losing the ability to use GyroFlow depending on the 4K mode you choose. Remember, 4K at 50 FPS can only be shot in 4:3 and no gyro data is recorded, so you can't stabilize 4K 50 on this camera. You've got to drop it to 4K 30 max if you intend to stabilize. Overpromising and under-delivering on specifications is nothing new in the FPV camera space, especially with budget products. But if I didn't talk about it, I feel like I wouldn't be giving you an honest assessment of this camera. With that said, now let's talk about my experience using the stabilization with GyroFlow and how I've gotten the most success out of this camera on my setups. So for starters, I strongly recommend buying or 3D printing this holder for the Hawkeye Thumb 2. It is a soft dampened mount and it's going to keep Jello out of your footage. I've put it here on my Cinebot 30 and I'm using it to do this chase. As you can see, it is Jello free. But the Cinebot is already pretty good as far as keeping any vibration out of the video, which is why I think the 5-inch footage might be a little more impressive for some of you to see. That's my 5-inch quad with this mount on it, and this thing is not perfectly tuned. You're going to see a lot of shakes, just like that right there, in the unstabilized footage that do not make it into the GyroFlow stabilized version. So I think this is a great example of how probably a lot of people are going to use this camera. You're looking for something really cheap to throw on your 5-inch quad that you might not have to worry too much about it breaking. And with this mount, I think it's nice to know you're not going to have Jello and it's going to function. So let's take a look at just what GyroFlow is doing with this camera to stabilize this footage. On the right, you will see a whole bunch of settings that have been customized by Hawkeye. This is actually a Hawkeye customized version of GyroFlow that you need to download if you want to get the best out of this camera, or the stock version does not work well with it, unfortunately. So yeah, I don't like that I have to have 2 copies of GyroFlow. But anyway, that is what you need to do, and nothing actually tells you that. So let's take a look. Let's freeze frame here and just kind of see what this camera does, right? So there's a lot of lens correction. And if I turn on stabilization, it flattens things out and does a ton of zoom depending on what is going on. And here's another example. Stabilized, unstabilized, and another freeze frame, stabilized, unstabilized. So there is a lot of zooming going on in the default settings that Hawkeye has set up. You can decrease that a little bit by changing this smoothness value here. The default smoothness that they have set is 0.04. You could change it to 0.3 or 0.2, and I think that is a little bit better as far as not overcropping everything. As you can see here, you're still getting some stabilization, but you're also not cropping way too much out of it, right? Because if you go all the way to 0.4, yeah, that's quite a bit that gets cropped away. So that's no good. I think 0.2 or maybe 0.25 is probably that in between spot. But again, it's also going to depend on just how shaky certain areas of your footage is, right? So I think you are going to have to play with it a little bit, but the laziest thing to do, the easiest thing to do is probably just set it to 0.2. And if you look here, I think it's doing a pretty good job. Like I'll take the footage off of here, and here's a flip I'm going to do. And that's a lot of shakiness right there. And now let's put it on with the stabilization. And it takes it right out, right? Like that looks pretty darn smooth. And again, we're going through here and we'll just take a look at what that looks like as well with no stabilization turned on. Yeah, kind of shaky, but it smooths it all out. So now that right there is also very shaky. So let's turn on stabilization. And again, it smooths it out as I'm doing that corner there. Here's another clip in GyroFlow, and this time it's not from a drone. It's just me walking around with the camera so you can see how the stabilization behaves in this kind of usage case. Now, here's what the footage looks like with no stabilization on. It's quite shaky there, isn't it? So GyroFlow is doing a good job correcting the shakiness. It's not perfect, obviously, and also there's a bit of a tilt there. I don't know if that's just the way I was holding the camera or not, but this footage would be pretty crappy to look at if I did not have the stabilization. Now, if we go over to here a little bit, I'm going to walk up the stairs here. I've got the stabilization, or the smoothness rather, set to 0.2 here. If you use Hawkeye's stock 0.4, again, to me, that's too much zoom. It's just not necessary. Same thing as with the drones. If we put it at 0.2, I really think that is probably the sweet spot for this camera. And I'm walking up the stairs. You can see, that is the shakiness. Again, let's just watch that stairs again. Very shaky, but I turn it on and it actually functions pretty well. Again, this is with the latest firmware and you've got to have it if you want this result. The firmware up until this point has actually been pretty crappy. So here we go. Checking out the Missouri River. We've gotten a lot of rain recently, and yeah, it's full of mud here. The Thumb 2 introduces a much welcomed, in my opinion, app to manage and change settings on the camera. So let's talk about how to use it. You power the camera up with the single press and then double press the top button, and that puts the camera into Wi-Fi mode. When you see it blinking red and green like this, it's going to emit a little Wi-Fi network. You connect to it on your phone, and the app is called OKJ. You will find it in all of the app stores. The app gives you control over certain settings. Now, I have to admit, I've not messed with any of this here. I pretty much just left everything as it was out of the box. In fact, some of these settings I don't think even apply to this camera. I don't know if this OKJ app is specific for just the Hawkeye. Your resolution options are 4K, 2.5K, and 1080. The gyro is available for all of them except for 4K at 50. The app does have a videos tab where you can browse the microSD card contents, play them back, or download it to your phone. Now, I think the Wi-Fi network on this camera is a little slow. I kept my phone as close as possible, but I still experienced lag and stuttering while I was playing it back. It's probably good enough just to see if you got the shot, but it's not the best experience. Also, the downloading of the videos to my phone was slower than I expected. This is an 800 megabyte video, and it's really taking a snail's pace there to download. So just keep that in mind. I don't think the Wi-Fi network on this camera is very fast. The app is definitely not perfect, but as far as the basics go of just giving me a preview so I can see that I have my camera mounted correctly on my quad and a little bit of playback, it's good enough for me. So there's another funny thing about this camera, and it's that you can't actually use the camera vertically, even though the ads kind of show it upright like this. You can't use it vertically. You've got to use it horizontally. This is not going to affect most of you guys doing FPV with it, but yeah, if you were hoping to use this vertically, that's just not going to happen. Alrighty, well, that is a wrap for the Hawkeye Thumb 2 review. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you guys have any questions at all, and I'll try to answer them. I think that as a budget camera, this is pretty decent. Just throw on your quad and get some footage casually. It's better than posting analog. It's better than posting DJI DVR or Walksnail DVR, whatever system you're using. You know, since I've had this camera for a couple months now, actually since April, there was a point that I was struggling so much with the current firmware when I got it that I was going to just completely write this camera off. In a way, Hawkeye actually kind of got lucky because I was just too busy to put together this video. So I'm really glad that in that time, they've made these improvements, and I'm looking forward to seeing what further they can do to get more out of this camera, whether that be improving GyroFlow or somehow improving the quality. I wouldn't hold my breath on that. I think the resolution is what it is. But as long as you know that and the other nuances surrounding this camera, you can make an informed choice as to whether to buy it. Anyway, I'm going to do some flying. You guys take care.